Hey everyone, so I'm kind of digging making these videos, and as I'm thinking about what to do, I find myself gravitating more towards what attracts me about, the pistols I have, the guns I have in general, and the common thread is that I like that is, that which is not common. So it can be a variation of something, it could be, something that everyone has, but for some reason mine stands out. So give you an example, this is my Glock 19 and it is a regular run-of-the-mill Glock. Really nothing too special about it. It's got a New York trigger, night sights, but this one is a former Wells Fargo gun. Yep, the bank, the security company, going back to the cowboy days, but we're not talking about this one. This is just really for comparison onto this thing right here. So now you got that the Glock went away. You can't see it because of this behemoth. So what we got right here is a Star Megastar. So what is a Star Megastar? Well, you've heard a lot of things about Spanish steel and Spanish guns, which, by the way, if I were to count, I probably have more of those than I have of anything else for whatever reason. But the one thing that you don't often hear is Spanish engineering. I'm not really sure if that's a thing or if I just think it's a thing, but I'm going to show you with this piece of work right here why I think Spanish engineers are, call it underrated or whatever. So anyway, this is a Star Megastar. So also known as the Model 50. This chunk of steel came out in the 90s, and they had this version like we have right here, 45, and there was also one in 10 millimeter. If given the choice, I would go with a 10 millimeter just because, like I said before, I like things which are unusual and different, aside from the fact that I am a freaking massive 10 millimeter fan. Great caliber, but this one's pretty cool itself. So I'll start off by pointing out that this is not the most pristine example. In all transparency, I got it off a gun broker a couple of years ago, and the dealer did actually say that he got it off a police auction. So when I got it, it did have this scratch where it was dropped at one point. It had no mag, and then in the insides, which I'll show you in a bit, it was really nasty, and I'll tell you why when I do tear it apart. So anyway, Star Megastar right here. Like I said in my other video, I have larger than average hands, and this thing is a heifer. So first start with the basics. This is a 12 round count magazine. Nothing else fits it that I know of. So sometimes you'll find in like a double stack 45 that like a para ordnance or something like that will fit, but this one is unique to the Megastar. So, and the finish on this floor plate matches the finish on the gun, which Star referred to as a Star though. So a couple things that stand out here. Let's start with the safety. So the safety is the opposite of what you would normally find in most of slide mounted safety handguns, where I'd call it reversed. So it pivots on a forward axis. Up, if you see the red dot there, is fire. Down is safe. And then when you got the hammer back, it's actually a decocker. So I believe this thing, yeah, it has a, like most of the Star double stack handguns that came out, it has a magazine disconnect, which is usually a transfer bar right inside the frame above the right grip panel. But this one is no different. So when you see the hammer, when I first picked this up, it caught my attention how little travel it had before it went forward. And if you look at how stubby the hammer is in comparison to the size of the handgun itself, I would expect a much taller hammer, and I'll show you why again in a minute. So there's your release Very squishy, as you see. Gets to the end, you got some more squish, and boop, there it goes. And you reset. There you go, it's right about there. So pull, 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 pretty heavy, and then it breaks. Pretty mushy trigger overall. It's not the best. It actually feels kind of funky with what I think, again, to be this otherwise stubby hammer. You'd think that you'd feel a little bit more travel, but you don't. So I'm going to keep the slide release. So this is a slide release right here. Nice big magazine release button. I'm going to keep this pressed so you can see. So pull, 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 click, and then let's see if we can see where it resets. There you go. It's pretty long. So by no means best in class when it comes to triggers, so that is not the example of Spanish engineering that I was referring to. Your sights are this sort of kind of Novak-esque, just because of, you know, this upward ramp. White. 2 dots in the back, and I believe at some point the front had a white dot, but that's been dirtied up. I'd have to go and clean it even better than I did already, just so we can see that. Like I said, your slide release, your mag release, and then your front sight, and here you got your big 45 bore. So for comparison, I will bring out what we could call its, I don't know, it's probably its older brother or sister, and that is the Star 30M. So this is Star 30M, by the way, my favorite handgun of all time, just because of the design. But this is the Star 30M. So these two are pretty similar for a number of reasons. Now, let's first talk about where they are dissimilar. They are dissimilar in, like we pointed out before, the slide safety, which this one has a forward axis. This is the slide safety on the Star 30, which has a rearward axis. And this one does not have a decocking function, okay? So when I was talking about the hammer, the stubby little hammer on the Megastar, it's almost as if they took a regular Star 30 hammer and just did some machining tweaking. I mean, clearly they're not the same. The Megastar is a bit wider, but you can probably see that the 30 hammer is definitely longer. So what does that translate into? That translates into a much more positive click, if nothing else. And this trigger is definitely better than the Megastar. All right, so what else is different? The slide release, clearly, is different. Where this one is more to the rearward position, this one is integral with the hammer. Sorry, the barrel link. This one is separate. You see the forward or the front sight on this one ramps forward. This one angles backwards. The mag release button on the 30M is a little tiny dot. This thing's pretty big. And then your lanyard loop on the Megastar is right here, protruding from the bottom. Whereas this particular example of a 30M, which is a police trade-in, has a lanyard loop into the frame. Now this is not standard on these. My understanding is that there was a batch, this particular batch of trade-ins that came out of, I believe the Basque region in Spain, had these added on by armorers afterwards. And this is information from a former employee of Star, mentioned that these are not factory installed. So anyway, you got your lanyard loop right here on the actual grip. clearly for a right-hander, right? And this one's at the base. Now, why is this important? It's important because typically lanyard loops have been exclusive to either police or military handguns, and this thing is not. At least I have not seen any sort of government or official otherwise sales, and I'm far from an expert, but I do some research into the things I like. And like I said, this one I don't believe has sold into any military or police force, at least not officially. So for it to have a lanyard loop is odd. Okay. All right, let's put this thing aside, and then let's start looking into why I think the Megastar is pretty friggin' cool. And it's not just because of its size. So I have not taken this thing apart in a while. We'll take it apart together, and I kind of like doing it that way just so that you can see what I can either see or what I feel as I either find something out or remind myself, let's say. So call it a reaction video. All right, so this one, your barrel link, retaining pin, recoil pin, whatever you want to call it, is nothing more than a pass-through. You push it out. It is captive, so I can't take it out, but that does free the barrel and therefore the slide. All right, so let's talk briefly about what we got going on here. So if you know about the Star, the 28 series, which includes the 30, 31s, you may know that the rails are what they call internal rails. So they don't run externally like do a significant portion of handguns. I'm not going to say the majority, but a significant portion. You see how your rails, they kind of flutter outwards, and then that captures the slide, the machined internal rails on the slide, and it rides on that. This is not what we got here, where it's the opposite. So you have the frame cuts are machined, and it, let's say it flares inwards, so it goes inwards, and then the slide rails on your frame are machined into the length of the frame. So this is derivative of the CZ75 series of handguns. I would not imagine that those were the first ones to have it, but they definitely did put it on the map. And Star, when they were designing this thing, they copied many aspects of the CZ line, enough to make that very, very particularly noticeable. So what's cool about this is that when you have these slide rails machined as an inward slide rail, your slide tends to ride on more of a surface of your handgun. So that typically results in smoother operation. Depending on what you're shooting, it may have reduced recoil, number of things, increased accuracy, less wobble, all that sort of thing. So why is it less common? I don't know, but I do know that some gun manufacturers have made it very specific. So these are internal rails. Now let's take a look at what's inside the frame for a second before we go over to the slide, and then we'll be back at the frame. So this has, if you see here, looking for the magazine safety. So if you see that little carbon steel you got a little carbon steel machine piece right here, and then you have this thing, this flapper, and pushes up, and that will release your hammer. Okay, so Some people take those out. I don't really care to take it out. For whatever reason, it really annoys them. My perspective is just, enjoy it for what it is, and if that's a big deal, then probably find a different handgun that does not have that as part of the design. Your slide release, pretty interesting that it's pivots on the rearward axis as well. I like the opposite of the slide safety. And then you just got your standard stuff in here. So when I actually bought this gun, I took it apart. It was really, really gummy. And I think that the previous person to have it, I'm not going to call him an owner, but for whatever reason felt that using motor oil as a lubricant was acceptable because it was nasty. So it took a while to clean out, and you can still see that this one's still not perfect. I really, really put a lot of elbow grease to say and clean this thing out. But anyway, so I got most of that out. Let's take a look at the slide and the assembly in here. Take out the recoil spring, which is not captive, as you saw. Put that off to the side, and then you can rattle out your barrel. So if you look at the barrel, you'll see that this is flared outwards, and this is Star's take on their take on what would otherwise be like an accuracy measure, a bushing of sort. Colt did a variation of this. Not all the Stars have that. You'll see right here. I'll show you briefly that the 30 does not, but you'll notice the 31 does if you have one. So anyway, the purpose of that is to say secure in the slide, and so it doesn't rattle around, and gives it that accuracy. There's your nice rifling. Like I pointed out the last time, I like seeing the rifling. So no, I've not cleaned it since I last shot it, but you'll see that the ramp clearly, everything here is either chromed or satin finish. Then your internals as well, so very much the opposite of what would be if I were to rotate this, turn it around. You have your hammer safety and all the good stuff in here. So other than that, pretty straightforward. Not too difficult to disassemble. Oh, and it's not the tilting link. So this is also like your CZ series where it's a modified Browning. It's not tilting, it's just machined so that when the slide recoils, it will follow the groove and then disengage the locking lug hook inside, spit out the casing, and then move on. All right, so this one, let me see if I remember how to take this apart. Okay. All right, cool. I remembered. All right, so this is one of the things that really stands out about these Star series of pistols. Is this. Check that out. So, I wouldn't call it modular per se, but Star was very deliberate in making that design and including it in a significant number of its handguns. The Star 28s, the 30s, 31s, they all have that where your firing mechanism is a self-contained unit, and you essentially press a button and slide it out. Some come out easier than others, but that is how these work. So then another great thing about the Star or at Spanish handguns or firearms overall is that they would stamp their weapons with year codes. So you can see, amongst all the proof marks and other stampings that these things will have. Usually it will have a flaming bomb that you see here. It will have a shield and a crown of sorts, or a helmet, and then it will have typically letters, and then depending on where they were in that point of manufacture, it was followed by a number or a dash or a star or something like that. So this one right here, if you look at it, it says M2. So M2 refers to the gun having been made in 1993. So that's where you have M2 is 1993. So this particular handgun was made in 1993. So like I said, on most of your Spanish handguns, and I would think also the long guns, you can just look for this and you'll find, you'll be able to date it. That's pretty cool. That's not something that every single manufacturer does. Okay, so getting back to the self-contained firing mechanism right here, you have your slide release that as I pointed out before, pivots on the rear. You got your hammer, you got your sears, you got your spring. This is the detent button. You got your lanyard, loop, retainer, whatever you want to call that. And if we look at this pretty closely, it's almost as if this was a MIM part. So metal injection molding. So similar to what Ruger does, and has so well perfected to the point that Ruger was and may still be making like golf heads, golf club heads and whatnot. They are bar none best in class, but just looking at the finish of this, it almost looks like it's almost MIM. And why do I also say that is because if you look in here, these recesses, these things do not look machined. This definitely looks cast, but this is, yeah, see, all this looks like it's cast, and very well done as well. And then when you start looking at the slide, you got some similar stuff going on there. So seeing if we have any clear giveaways such as seams, which you sometimes see, but this one can just barely make out towards here, not where it's polished, but somewhere here you can see very slightly, you can definitely see it back here, what is your, you know, your mold seam. But otherwise it is just about undetectable. Very high quality, very well made. So, and then you got your grips right here, which in most of these Star 28 series, which I'm going to say that this is an iteration of your 28 series, so 28, 30, 31, and I don't know what was in between 31 and 50, like this thing right here, but this being the model 50, somehow got that designation. So these will typically retain in machining grooves or slots in the actual frame. Now the Star 30 over there, it's actually rubber, and it has an integral piece of stamped metal, which this one is clearly just molded plastic, which I would argue is perhaps a little bit more on the delicate side, but I'm not backing that up with fact at all. That's just speculation. But anyway, see, fits in like a nice puzzle. And then if this thing doesn't make me look like I don't know what I'm doing, this should just slide right in. How about that? Look at that. It just clicked right in. Super easy. Voila. We got our retaining pin. Fit the slide to the frame, and it set in the inner rails. Gotta push this stuff down. That's kind of annoying, but it's not just this handgun. Line it up a bit. There's no lining grooves, which the Star 30 has these two little lines that you line them up to take it apart. This does not. You just kind of got to figure it out. So slides in, magazine. That's it. So with these having been made so late in the game, particularly for Star, as they were just about to give up the ghost for a number of reasons, it's interesting that they really tried to make this appealing to a market, and it looks like they were going after the competitive shooters. So back then it was IPSC, IDPA was not quite around. You had some of those that were they were pretty hot in the scene. Most of the guys used like 38 Super and whatnot, and it just appears that they went after that market. That, or they were just tickling and they were just scratching an itch, and they just figured, who knows, hey, let's just see how we can make this thing happen, screw everything else, and go with that. So I don't know how this was ideated, but I do know that they did put some really, really good thought into it. So firing this thing is, it does definitely recoil. Sometimes you'd think that because of extra mass it doesn't always recoil, but this has your high bore axis, so it will recoil. It's kind of snappy, but it's a ton of fun. Super reliable, just as these are, and definitely not something that you always see out there in the range. These for retail, 10 millimeter right now, I've seen them north of $1,000, and these I've seen them around 600. I was fortunate to get it for less than that, but you just gotta keep your eyes open. But if you do get one, they will last for eons. They will not give up. None of the parts I hear in here I expect to break or otherwise fail. They're just very well made, very robust, very well thought through. So yeah. So anyway, again, figured I'd show you some of the other things I have, not just your regular Glock, even though it is a Wells Fargo one. But this thing right here is definitely on my list of one of the cool ones I have. So hopefully you found this entertaining or informative, and yeah. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll be back at another point. All right, take it easy. Cheers.